Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got a really interesting Canadian company based in Quebec to introduce you to. It's a medical technology company that has got a device and some software that they're developing that by investigating what is going on in the retina of people's eyes can tell us if we've got some mental health issues. It's fascinating. I want to introduce you to the investment banker who I've dealt with before, who I have a ton of respect for, Pierre-Jean from Paris, France, who is the investment banker that's helping them go out and raise some money and get to market. Pierre-Jean, welcome to the show. And can you tell us a little bit about your client?
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you very much for hosting us. In a nutshell, as you know, I created my own investment bank about 2.5 years ago, and we have a specialty. We are dedicated to the world of life science, which is over 50% of our business. And it just happened that I encountered this company named diaMentis, which is incorporated in Canada, in Quebec, and I was amazed. And I'm there to say that among the 350 transactions that I could book in my past as a banker, this is definitely in the top 3 for me. The reason being that we're talking about saving lives. We're saving lives with diaMentis because they found a device, a software, which is artificial intelligence, that gives direct results with a great accuracy in the field of mental health. Namely in 3 fields, heavy depression, also schizophrenia, and bipolarity. And you know, I'm a bipolar, so I was very sensitive to this outbreaking success that they've made so far. The technology is amazingly, it's a disruption. What it does is that with a patient that is wondering if he's got mental health problem, it will have a 10-minute exam that will consist in capturing the reflection in the retina of the patient of lights, which is sent to his eyes. And with artificial intelligence, the model, the software, will determine if the patient has one of the 3 diseases. I faced in my past when I know something wasn't doing right for me in my brain, and it took me over 5 years to get the right diagnostic. And you have to know that in developed countries, the usual time required for a patient to point out whether he's got a mental health situation is anywhere between 5 to 7 years. In this case, we're talking 12 hours.
Hold it. You're saying that the typical diagnosis of someone with depression or bipolar or schizophrenia is 5 to 7 years? Seriously?
That is correct. Yes, this is correct. What will happen is that, go on.
Yeah, the NIMH said last year that they found out that it goes up to 11 years. So it takes a long time because psychiatry is the only medical specialty who has no tool to help diagnose. We're still functioning with questionnaire and long-term observation of symptoms that change over time. And when the disease begins, the symptoms are really non-specific. They're the same symptoms for every disease. So the physicians don't know what's going on. They go on with the diagnosis, which is the more frequent. Usually it's anxiety or depression. They treat, it doesn't work. They increase the medication, they change the treatment, and the patient goes, with the years, the patient goes worse and worse. And it takes many, many years before the diagnosis becomes clear. And those patients are usually followed by their family physicians. And when they get seriously ill, 5, 6 years after the beginning, they're sent to the psychiatrist, but it's too late because the brain has been damaged and it's irreversible. So that's the problem that we have in psychiatry. With our technology, we are able to see the pathology before it appears. So it will make a big difference. And when the patient comes with the first symptoms, if the physician asks for the test, he will know right away in which direction the patient will evolve. And he will be able to take the good action to save the patient and prevent the apparition of the psychosis. for
This is fascinating. I have some follow-up questions, but maybe Pierre-Jean, you could introduce our guest before I ask the follow-up question.
My pleasure. I'm very glad to introduce Marc Guérin. He's a physician, a psychiatrist with a great CV, and he has joined diaMentis. I think it was in 2015, Marc. Is that correct?
That we incorporated, yes. The late 15, yeah, November.
And what is it that you're doing in your position at diaMentis?
I support the group, support the morale. And I try to help them to maintain the focus on the subject, because it's very easy to go all over the place, but we have to focus on our main goal.
Maybe I'll come back and ask you a little bit about your background in a couple of minutes, sir. But two things that you mentioned that I wasn't aware of, and maybe you could elaborate. What you said, I believe, was that number one, once I don't know whether you call it a disease or what, but once the mental health issue is established, I think you said it's irreversible and cannot be treated.
In the severe mental illnesses like schizophrenia, you have a destruction of part of the brain in the forehead. And when it's done, it's irreversible. So if we can prevent that, we will give the patients a chance to have a normal life. It's like diabetes. If your diabetes is well treated, you will have a normal life. If it's not well treated, your kidneys, your eyes, all the organs will be progressively destroyed, and eventually you will die of it. So
I guess the extension of that, sir, is that therefore early diagnosis is extremely helpful.
The early diagnosis is the key. And that's the same problem with every medical disease. For example, if you have a heart attack, if you're diagnosed right away, you can be treated in the same day and survive. If you're not, if it takes time, and the same with cancer and every disease. And all the other specialties have made progresses in the last 15, 20 years, because they had tools to diagnose early and treat early. And it made a big difference on the survival and the quality of life of the patients. In psychiatry, we still don't have any tool. And we're the first to come with a tool that will help the physicians to arrive faster at the right diagnosis and the right treatment for the patient.
And I think you told me that you have been in psychiatry for 40 or 50 years. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm swimming in psychiatry since 1973. So.
And are you telling me that the tools you're using today, questionnaire and observation over time, are the exact same tools you used 40 or 50 years ago?
Yes, it hasn't changed. It's the same since the Greeks. It's nothing has changed. We have absolutely no tool to help us. So we have to question and observe and question, and the patients don't always tell the truth, sometimes voluntarily, but sometimes because they don't know what's going on. And it takes many, many years. And as Pierre-Jean said, the average time to diagnose a severe mental disease is between 5 and 7, 9 years.
And this tool that you're developing, that is both a medical device as well as software and data that backs up the medical device, will potentially give a diagnosis in how long?
It will help to get an idea within 12 hours. The patient will have a test which lasts 10, 15 minutes. What we collect from the test is sent to our data center. It's analyzed by the computers, and we send the answer to the physician, telling him in which direction his patient is going. So the physician will be able to decide what to do. And if the patient comes to see him for the first time, he will, and he's told that the patient is probably going to become schizophrenic, he might want to refer the patient to the psychiatrist sooner instead of waiting and trying all sorts of drugs. So that will make a big difference, and that will help the physicians to get confidence in themselves, because when you see these patients, you don't know what's going on, you try something, so you go with trial and error for many, many years, and you're not very confident in what you're doing, and the patient becomes to be he doubts about your qualification to help him, because you give him a diagnosis and a treatment and it doesn't work, and you change your diagnosis, you change the treatment, he has side effects and it doesn't work, and you change, and each time you have to convince the patient that he has to have a treatment. At the end, he doesn't believe you. When you tell him, I know now it's clear you're schizophrenic, he doesn't believe you. He doesn't want to take your drug, especially when you have to give them a very high dosage, because they're so sick that they need the dosage for horses. So it's a real problem that we have in medicine and in psychiatry.
So if someone was diagnosed 5 or 7 years earlier than they otherwise would be diagnosed, and you were able to therefore send them to the psychiatrist and give them the appropriate drugs.
And with lower dosage. So if we can give them lower dosage of medication, they won't have so many side effects, and that will prevent the psychosis to appear. So they will be able to continue their studies, they have to have a job and have a family and have a normal life, which is not the case right now. Because when they have a psychosis, they spend many months in the hospital, sometimes a few years, and when they come out, they're unable to resume their studies. And that schizophrenia appears between the age of 14 and 24, usually, the majority of cases. So it affects young people, contrary to other diseases like heart problems that affect older people. But the mental illnesses are affecting people when they're young, in the adolescence and early adulthood. It's the same with
14
many
and
depressive
24.
patients.
Between 14 and 24. So that therefore, if you have to wait 5 to 7 years.
Yeah. They come, let's say the patient comes to 14, 15 years old. He's brought by his parents. He has a few symptoms. They try all sorts of drugs. And finally, he becomes floridly psychotic when he's 19 or 20. And then it's too late, because the brain has been damaged already. So the only thing you can do is try to stop that. But to stop that, the patient has to take high dose of medication, and that brings many side effects. So they stop their medication, they have a relapse, and with each relapse, they go down. Their capacities are going down, and they deteriorate with each psychosis. So it's an impossible situation that we're in. With our test, the physician will be able to prevent the apparition of the psychosis and right away give the good medication and save the patient life. And those schizophrenic who kill themselves, the majority of them, the suicide appears during the prodromal phase. So during those years when the symptoms are unclear, and that's where we have the most suicide with these patients. So we will be able to prevent that as well.
You have used the word psychosis several times. Could you explain to all of our listeners what psychosis is, sir?
It's a kind of loss of contact with reality. The patient is unable to see the reality how it is. So he perceives something and he interprets it in the wrong way. And for example, he becomes paranoid. He thinks that when people look at him, they're spying on him. Or he hears something and he thinks that it's a sign that somebody is trying to put microphones in his apartment and listen to all his everything he says. Or they think that there are cameras in their apartments. They think they're followed on the streets, and they hear voices. They think that these voices are talking to them, talking against them. So they lose contact with reality. And it starts with normal things that they're unable to interpret the reality the way we normally do. So
it sounds like an absolutely fascinating company and very important development. We're going to have to take a break for some messages. We're going to come back in 2 minutes, and we're going to introduce ourselves to the CEO of the company, Normand Tremblay, who's also joined us, and delve a little bit more into exactly how this product this medical technology, this software has been developed, how it can go through the approval process, how it can actually be used by all of us in our society, and what the potential impact is. It sounds like it's groundbreaking. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. The company is diaMentis out of Quebec with a really an investigative way of understanding mental health issues. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Really interesting company that I want to introduce you to tonight. diaMentis is its name. It is a Quebec-based medical device company that really has developed some software that analyzes how light impacts with the retina. We'll have to explain in greater detail exactly how this works, but it would seem that based on this, they can, compared to a database, tell us whether a patient has got mental health issues, whether it's got schizophrenia or bipolar or other things, and diagnose people in 12 hours rather than 5 to 7 years. And as we've been just explained, that it's the first tool that the psychiatric business has been provided since the Greeks to analyze and understand mental health issues. I want to introduce you to the investment banker that introduced me to this company, Pierre-Jean from Paris, France. Pierre-Jean, tell us a little bit about how you ran into this company, and please introduce the CEO.
I ran into this company a little less than a year ago. I found it through articles that I found on the internet that were just, as you say, it's a breakthrough technology. I found out very early that what they're doing is they provide to the patient within 12 hours a perfect analysis, rational analysis, unbiased analysis in the field of mental health, which is a field in medicine which has no device in order to assess the situation of the mental health of a patient. So I'm very pleased to introduce a friend of mine, Norman. He's currently the CEO of diaMentis. If you can give to people listening to us some reassurance on the fact that, and that's an old story that we have together, that diaMentis is no longer an early stage company, but rather a late stage company. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Pierre-Jean. Thank you, Mr. Crombie. It's my pleasure this morning to be with you. Yes, we arrive at the late stage of the process of the homologation of the technology. We are not very far, probably around 18 to 20 months. All depend the resource we get to homologate the product, because this story started in 2010 at the University Laval, and diaMentis is a spin-off from the University Laval, and our goal is to develop and industrialize this product and homologate the product, and be sure put this product on the market around the world with the strategic partner after the homologation process, the first one with the FDA.
So when you say the product, so what do you have to get approved from the FDA? Is this a device that needs to get approved, or it is a software that needs to get approved? And how do you actually then put it into clinical use? I presume it needs a device to take a look at the retina, as well as a software that analyzes the information that comes out.
Yes, it's very simple as a process. We're using a traditional ERG system. They are already in some hospital around the world for evaluate the power of the...
Please tell everyone what an ERG is.
Electroretinogram. This technology, it's an old technology for evaluate the potential of the problem from the retina. And we're using this technology, and because Dr. Guérin probably explained to you earlier, we can stimulate the retina by the light, and we develop a specific method to decipher the reaction of the brain by the analyzing the signal. And what we develop exactly is a software as a medical device, because we develop statistic method, new mathematic model to decipher the signal at a very, very high level. And with this information, we have a specific, give us to us a specific biomarker. And if you have a schizophrenic person or a moon disease problem, we have a specific biomarker on each indication. The same thing for the major depression. We have the specific, decipher the specific signal to get a biomarker. And with this technology, it's very easy for us and for the practitioner to see now what they face, what is the problem they face. As an example, if I can set that, an iceberg as an example for the general practitioner at the early stage of the disease, you see only the top of the iceberg. But with our technology, in the same time, we can see under the water what exactly what it's mean. And because we have the specific biomarker, and this biomarker, it's the mathematic model. They are inside the software as a medical device.
So could you please explain what a biomarker is and how you could tell the difference between someone that has bipolar disease versus schizophrenia by shining light at the retina?
It's a mathematic model. We can grab this information. It's a kind of a specific figure, a three-dimension figure for us, and we see exactly the pattern or a biosignature example. And we can read very easily because a control subject, a schizophrenic subject, because we analyze the number of points, the reaction of the brain, and we can, mathematically speaking, arrive in a conclusion with algorithm and some different model to see exactly the picture on a schizophrenic person, a control person, or a moon disease.
Now, I think most people listening today would be familiar with pharmaceutical trials that have to, take a couple hundred or 1,000 people through a pharmaceutical trial and see how a drug works to make sure that it's safe and efficacious, and compare it to a placebo sugar pill. How do you actually get a clinical trial of your product to present to the FDA to prove that it actually diagnoses correctly schizophrenia or bipolar disease?
Yes, at the earlier stage, the proof of concept, they already run with the Université Laval. They made this, they observed 1,000 patients at the proof of concept. And we have a clear picture because the first step was to evaluate people. They are schizophrenic, moon disease, major depression, or a controlled subject. And we develop a specific picture on each indication. And we have a picture of that. And we can compare a control and a non-controlled subject, the one who have some indication. And it was very easy for us to have this clear picture. And the validation clinical trial, as probably you know, we get a breakthrough designation from the FDA. And this because we have a robust proof of concept, and the process is a speed up because is a safe technology, because it's a very, very interesting approach. Nothing exists in the field. And for us, we have a robust biosignature on each disease. And for the FDA and the clinical trial, not the clinical trial, but the investigator, it was very clear for them the robustness of the technology and the proof of concept. They talk for us.
This is fascinating. Dr. Marc, I wonder if you could take a big step back, sir, and explain to our listeners, what is schizophrenia? What is bipolar disease? What are some of these diseases, and how prevalent are they in our community?
Schizophrenia is a disease, as I mentioned earlier, where the patient loses contact with the reality and becomes delusional. 1% of the population all over the globe is affected with schizophrenia, and this has been stable for more than 100 years since we study that. At the time when I did my medical study in the 1960s, there were 1% of the population who also had what we called at the time manic depressive disease, what we today call the bipolar disease. It was 1%. Today, the prevalence of manic depressive or bipolar is up to 3% because these patients are treated with adequate medication. So the number of suicide has decreased. They can have a normal life. They marry and they have children. So there are more and more manic depressive in the world. And that will continue to increase with time. But these diseases are quite different when they're in the fact, because schizophrenia affects the entire functioning of the brain and the personality, and the patient decreases with time with each relapse that he has, and he becomes unfunctional. While the bipolar patient functions normally in between the crisis. So you have the form, we used to say unipolar form. Some manic depressive patients have only depressive episodes. Others have depressive episodes and manic episodes. And some have rapid cycles. Some have, they all have their own pattern. But the majority of cases will have 1 or 2 phases per year. Usually it starts with hypomanic that becomes a mania. And when they come out of it, they fall into deep depression. And in between the crisis, they're functioning normally. So they don't have the same amount of brain deterioration that you have in schizophrenia. But schizophrenia is the worst mental disease that you can have because you become non-functional and very rapidly after the first psychosis appeared.
And you're saying suicide for both schizophrenia and bipolar is an issue. Any idea what percentage of people that have these diseases would actually commit suicide? Is that a statistic that's kept?
I don't recall exactly the percentage, but it's quite high.
Mr. Crombie, I can
Many
answer
patients who
this.
suicide are suffering from bipolar disease and they're not diagnosed, so we don't know. They're dead. So.
Mr. Crombie, the statistic is for the suicide is 80% suicide have a mental illness association, non-diagnosis.
80%? 80?
Yeah.
Yes, 80.
So if we could diagnose before, we would be able to prevent those suicides because we could treat these patients. They're suffering, they don't know what they're suffering of, and the physicians don't know. So,
And the treatment is pharmaceutical products?
Pharmaceutical products, yes. And a good example of the use of our tool is that if you have a patient who has the propension to be a manic depressive, a bipolar patient, he comes with a clear picture of depression. If the physician prescribes an antidepressant drug, that will push the patient into mania, and that will provoke the first psychotic state. If he knows that the patient is going to react that way, he won't prescribe an antidepressant at first. He will prescribe a tranquilizer that would prevent the apparition of the mania, and that will save the patient. So it is very important to know in advance what you have in front of you if you're a physician. Otherwise, you're in the fog. You know?
This is interesting. Let me see if I understand you, sir. So you're saying is if someone comes that is not depressed, but actually is psychotic and is given an antidepressant, it will bring on the mania more quickly than it otherwise would?
If a patient has suffers from bipolar disease,
Yes.
okay, but he doesn't know, and the physician doesn't know, and he comes to the physician in a depressive mood state. He's depressed. He's clearly depressed. You know, has no energy, cannot sleep, cannot concentrate. He's very anxious. He loses interest. So he's depressed. So the physician will normally prescribe an antidepressant drug, which is very effective to treat the depression. But if the patient suffers from a manic depressive, the antidepressant drug will provoke the apparition of the mania because the patient will start to feel better and he will go overboard. and he becomes hypomanic and then maniac. And then he sees everything in pink. Life is fantastic, and he's a great man, and he'll solve the world, and he has a mission, and he loses contact with reality.
And so understanding whether someone is just depressed versus is bipolar or psychotic is critically important to
Yes.
assess early on.
Yes, it is, because the majority of people who suffer from depression are not bipolar. They simply suffer from a depression. It could be a unique episode of depression. Some people will have more episodes. For example, the statistics are that if you have a first episode of major depression, when you recuperate, 60% of the people will have a second episode later on in their life. If you have a second episode, 90% of the people will have a third episode. And if you have a third episode, you'll have more episodes. So before, we used to consider it as part of one form of bipolarity. We would say it's a unipolar depression, which is cycling. Today, it's classified differently, but it's the same beast. So some people will have only depression. Other people will have depression and mania. Some people will have only mania. So there are different groups of patients, but it's all part of the same spectrum.
So Mr. Tremblay had said that there's biomarkers. Are there separate biomarkers for anxiety,
for each
depression,
pathology?
bipolar?
Yeah, and they're very specific to each pathology. It's like facial recognition. You have the picture. You can tell if the skin is dark or pale, if the nose is large, or if the eyes are blue or gray or brown, and it's the same thing. It's a very clear signature. It's very strong.
What causes bipolar disease and depression? Are these environmental? Are they genetic? What causes?
It's a combination. It's a biological defect. And it's triggered by what the person goes through in his life. We used to say that, for example, the majority of depression will come after a loss. You lose somebody, your house is burned down, you lose everything, or you lose your job. It's a stress, and then you start to become depressed. But not everybody becomes depressed when they lose somebody or something. So you need to have a predisposition for that. But what happens in your life will precipitate the apparition.
The predisposition is genetic?
It's genetic.
And you said it's 1% to maybe 3 or 4% now that people are living longer and not committing suicide. Why would a population always have 1 to 3% of its population that would suffer genetically these issues?
Why? It's like that,
It's like that.
It's the genetic.
We can do about it. It's the nature, Yeah.
But a fascinating company and a fascinating product. We're going to take a break for some messages. I'm going to come back in 2 minutes. I'm going to ask the CEO, Norman Tremblay, for a little bit description of the company, how big it is, what its prospects are, how we would potentially invest in it, et cetera. We're going to change from the science to the business for a couple of minutes when we come back. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes, we're chatting with the senior executives of a company out of Quebec called diaMentis that has a software as a product that actually diagnoses mental illness. Fascinating. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Introducing to you tonight a really fascinating company, diaMentis, out of Quebec. It's got a fascinating product that's really a software associated with a medical device, but a software that can diagnose mental illness and do so within 12 hours rather than what we're told is the typical diagnosis done by way of a questionnaire and observation that takes between 5 and 7 years. And I'm also shocked to find out that the vast majority of people with bipolar disease develop it between the ages of teenagehood and 24, And so therefore, if we could actually diagnose people more early, then we could treat them with pharmaceutical products, and we could alleviate I guess the progression of the disease, the psychosis. And so it's absolutely fascinating. The CEO, Norman Tremblay, is with us tonight. Mr. Tremblay, could you tell us, number one, just a little bit about your background, how you came to this company, and then maybe I'll ask you a little bit about the company itself, where it is, how much money you've raised, how much money you need to raise, when you think you're going to be able to go to market, et cetera. So tell us, sir, a little bit about you and how you came to be interested in mental health issues.
It's very simple. I'm involved in the drug development since 30 years. And in 2012, at that time, I worked as a consultant for myself. And the University Laval called me because my expertise is how we can bring a product at the earlier stage to bring this product at the late stage and industrialize a product. Because developing a product or a technology is one thing, but put the product at the right place with the right position at the right time in the right condition, well protected by intellectual property, create value with the product, and what is the value proposition of this product. And this is this expertise I have, if I can say that. And in 2012, University Laval asked me to evaluate this project. And myself, I've a rough experience in the field of mental illness in my family, and I've realized how at that time how this technology can change the world. And for those reasons, I've decided at the pro bono level in 2012 to 2015, when we decide to spin off this technology to raise money. And for asking your question, we raise now $41 million since we start in 2015 to to develop our mathematic model, protect, because today we have a patent on the US, Canadian market and European market. We have 7 patent PCT. They are already submit. We have another patent. They are already we get a new patent with the new method, the new system we develop, and this specific art, our science, we protect that since we get the patent since 1 month. And they're very interesting things we have in our hands, and we can use a portable equipment and a fixed equipment. For the general hospital of the psychiatric hospital, we have a fixed equipment. For a clinic, as an example of a general practitioner, we have a small equipment, and the portable one, we can go point of care with this technology. And when we grab the information from each patient, we transfer this information by internet to our data center. And at that place, the software as a medical device is resident there. And we can make this analyze and return this information to the general practitioner or the psychiatrist.
Are you private or public?
Private company, but we have 118 patients who are a public company, not non-inscrit, if I can say, no ticket.
118 patients or shareholders?
No,
shareholders. Excuse me. Shareholder.
No,
excuse me.
And when do you think you go to market? A year and a half, 2 years from now? Is that correct?
Yes, probably 20 months. It's the critical factor is to raising more money to increase our speed, and the speed is to have more site. If you have more site, the recruitment is more easier, quicker, and we are closer to the market for the homologation. But in the same time, we have to take to do the things very, very professionally, because nothing exists in the field of mental illness, and we have take care to do the perfect value proposition, because it's the first product, first to the market. We have to be very, very robust. The efficiency of this, the prediction rate is very high, the sensibility and the specificity too. And we have to take care of this first product, because after this one, we will the major depression, we have the non-psychiatric indication like autism, Parkinson, Alzheimer, because we develop a platform. It's not one biosignature. Dr. Guerre mentioned you earlier. We have now a couple of biosignatures for Moon disease 1, Moon disease 2, major depression, but now we have to run the clinical trial to showing the performance in this indication later.
Mark, I wonder if you could give us a little bit of a sense of your background as well, sir, please.
I'm a physician, a psychiatrist, and psychoanalyst, and I practiced psychiatry for over 50 years now in the hospitals, in my private office, and I taught psychiatry and psychoanalysis. And the last 20 years, I acted as a medical expert for the tribunals. And I've been seeing many, many patients, and this convinced me that it was a real problem to diagnose, because those patients that are sent to us for an expertise, the majority have a bad diagnosis, and that's the problem. And the physician doesn't know that he has a wrong diagnosis, because he cannot give the right answer, because he doesn't have enough material. That, as I explained before, to arrive at the diagnosis, you have to wait until the symptoms are very florid and very specific, because each pathology has specific symptoms. But for the first years, the symptoms are the same in every pathology. And it takes a long, long time before you're able to be certain that you have a schizophrenic or a manic depressive, for example. Because for many years, the symptoms are very similar and you don't know what's going on. So you try a diagnosis and you change your diagnosis, and you try a treatment and you change your treatment. It's a very big problem. And that's why I thought that this discovery from the University Laval was wonderful, because that is the first thing that will come and help the physicians to arrive faster at the right diagnosis and be able to give the right treatment to the patient.
Mr. Tremblay mentioned, Mark, that you can also diagnose Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Is that correct?
Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, and multiple sclerosis. Because you have to know that the retina is part of the brain. The retina is part of the frontal brain in the development of the fetus, and the vision center with the gestation moves to the back and the occipital region. But originally, the retina is part of the brain. So it's the only part of the brain that you can observe without opening the skull. You see the retina, you see part of the brain. So the retina captures the stimuli from the light. It doesn't have electrical signals by itself, not like the heart. The heart generates electrical signals, but the retina does not spontaneously generate signals. It generates a signal only in response to a stimulus that is sent to it. So you send a light flash, and the retina reacts. There are multiple type of cells in the retina, and they react, and this provokes waves that we can register. And that's how we function. And we see that in each specific pathology, neurological or psychiatric, the brain has a specific way to react, and we can see that in the retina.
And so this medical device is just sending light pulses to the retina?
We send light flashes. They're very, very short, it's millisecond flashes, and the retina reacts, and we capture the signal sent by the retina. We simply use an electrode, which is a wire,
DTL.
argentic wire, and we put it on the sclerosy here, and with that we capture the signal, and we send the signal to our data center, and it's analyzed, and we can see what is specific to each pathology.
This is absolutely fascinating. I was working with a company that actually had some eyeglasses that you would put on your face that had cameras that would take pictures of, I thought it was the pupil. And what they did is they sent light signals that would either go up in different directions or go into corners or closer to you or farther away from you. And they were taking pictures of the movement of the pupil of the eye. And they were able to, based on the comparison of how someone reacted versus, standards in the database, determine whether someone had a concussion or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. So it sounds like it's sort of a similar kind of process. And they said that the eye was the eye on the brain.
It's a little bit different. I can say that the retina is the window of the brain, and what we analyze is because the retina is we have a mechanism of action. They are relation with the brain, and we can measure the reaction of the brain with the stimulation of the light. And because we see the reaction of the brain, it's for those reasons. The reaction of the brain will be different from so many indications. It's a little bit different.
Pierre-Jean, maybe we can finish with you. You've been associated with numerous different medical device companies, pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, etc. How groundbreaking do you think this is? And do you think it's going to be something that will be attractive to investors?
Well, first and foremost, my friend, I think this company is about to save lives in a magnitude that nobody can think of. Just before I answer to your questions, bear in mind that 20% of the adult population in developed countries will face a situation of mental health during its lifetime. So
20%.
This is just amazing. 20% of adults would encounter at least once in their life a mental health situation. Yeah, my read about diaMentis, you have to see this company as the new ECG. When you go to a cardiologist and you want to see how your heart is doing, you don't think about it. You just do an ECG and you get immediately you get the result. Well, that's what we're talking about. We need this company to bring to the market this amazing technology, and when it will be done, I think it will be the equivalent of an ECG for a cardiologist, in this case for a psychiatrist. And this is huge in terms of life-saving. This is huge in terms of money. I think this company could save well more than 2 or 3% of GDP. Because when you face a mental health situation, you will be at your home, you will not work, you may die, which is lost to the community. So if we talk about money, as I say, it's well in excess of 1 or 2 points of GDP that could be saved thanks to this technology. Of course, this is my analysis.
Absolutely fascinating. Mr. Tremblay, Dr. Mark, I forgot your last name, sir. I apologize.
Guérin.
Thank you so much for joining us, Pierre-Jean. Again, I appreciate it. You know what? This is a groundbreaking opportunity. We're going to watch you with interest. Please check in as your trials continue and as your progress with the FDA continues. Thank you so much for joining us. That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Quebec or Paris, France, at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody. Gentlemen, good luck, and thank you, because I think this is critically important to our society.